to marketing as a foreign language. This, the 288th episode, if you can even believe it, and I know you can. If you're joining us live, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, you know we love you. If you're listening after the fact, iTunes, Spotify, etc., we love you too. Did you know that Google hit with more than 20,000 geofence warrants from 2018 to 2020? We're going to do the social media news. I quickly want to mention that our guest today, Theresa, Lina, has many years of experience, and you're going to want to stick around because she is a guru among gurus. CNET.com, all links to all articles in the description. Google received more than 20,000 geofence warrants in the U.S. in the last 3 calendar years, making up more than 1/4 of all warrants the tech giant received in that time. With geofence warrants, a controversial law enforcement tool, police can carve out a specific area and time period and ask Google to gather information about the devices that were present at that time. So it just goes to show that, people know where you are. In case you're wondering if you can be tracked on your phone, yeah, you sure can. So it must be hard to be a criminal nowadays. TheGuardian.com, Facebook, no, Twitter, yes. Which tech firms let the Taliban post? A lot of these tech companies have been in hot water because they have become the information police. And I don't mean that in a good way or a bad way. I mean it in a sobering way, which is to say that each of these tech giants is making a decision about who they let post and why. If you stop a political leader from posting, well, then they can be up in arms about censorship. And if you allow them all to post, then, lives may be lost because you did not make the correct decision at the correct time. It is not easy to do, obviously, with all of the tumult in Kabul, Twitter in hot water over allowing the Taliban to continue to post. Morningbrew.com, Facebook launching VR meeting spaces called workrooms. So pretty soon, you're not even going to have your own face in your Zoom meeting. It's going to be your avatar. And so people are really not going to have any idea who you are. Well, I should say who you are really. There will come a time, I imagine, the next 20 years where people will see maybe your profile pic that will be all doctored and photoshopped. But we're going to be living in a pretty much avatar-based environment. I give it about 20 years. Our guest today is the author of the best-selling book, Be the Go-To, How to Own Your Competitive Market, Charge More, and Have Customers Love You For It. CEO of the Lina Group Incorporated, many, many years of experience backstage. We're talking about ending human suffering and doing our part to do specifically that. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you, the completely enlightened Theresa Lina.
Hello.
So what is it like being completely self-realized at this point?
Well, I have all the answers, of course, like all consultants.
Yeah. Is the answer just to listen?
To do my little part. What?
Yeah. Is the answer just to listen to them and have them come up with the answer?
Well, you do the best consultants and strategists and marketers out there are good listeners for sure.
Mm-hmm. So let's dive into a scenario wherein you are in front of someone, they've paid you to consult for them. How do you navigate that space effectively?
Well, usually they know that they want to fix a particular problem that I specialize in, which is how do you achieve sustainable differentiation in a crowded competitive market, so that you can position yourself as a go-to instead of a me too. So, many of these companies that I have conversations with realize that they just cannot keep going as a commoditized provider in the marketplace, whether they have a product aimed at consumers or businesses, or whether they have a service aimed at either of those. So that's fundamentally the problem they're trying to solve. And so I come in and help them. I take them through and coach them through the methodology that I talk about in my book, which is the Apollo method for market dominance.
Okay, and let's talk about the steps of that method. What are they?
Yeah, so on the surface, it's going to sound almost like common sense, but companies don't do these steps, or they do little pieces of them, or they don't do them quite in the correct way. So there are 4 pieces: launch, ignite, navigate, and accelerate. And it's built around the theme of the Apollo space program, and we can talk in a few minutes about why that's applicable. So with the launch phase, just I'll give you the 30-second version of each of overview of each one. With the launch phase, the first thing you want to do is figure out what market problem you want to own out there in the market and decide what your point of view is on what needs to be done about that problem. This is something very few companies actually do. Most of them fixate on their solution and why customers should buy their solution. But with a go-to, when you're trying to be the go-to in a market, you really want to own a market issue and be the thought leader around that issue and the spiritual leader around that issue, and have a very distinctive point of view about what needs to be done, regardless of what your offering is. And then on top of that, in the launch phase, you do figure out what your unique approach to solving that problem is going to be. And it's an approach that solves the problem in such a valuable way that customers are willing to pay you more, and not just pay you based on the work you do or the product you deliver to their door, but rather the value they're receiving. So that's the launch phase. You decide the market problem you want to own, what needs to be done about it, your unique approach, and then you declare ownership of the problem in the marketplace, and you announce your approach. The next phase is the ignite phase. And in this phase, you're going out and you're leading a movement out in the marketplace around your point of view and approach. So you're out there really, trying to build momentum and mobilize the market to do something about this problem, and then also understand, what your point of view is, and agree on, and help evangelize the point of view that you're out there espousing, and then hopefully also your solution. And in this phase, you're really starting with power brokers in the marketplace and influencers, because you want to, in leading that movement, you get other people also proselytizing on your behalf. So that's the ignite phase. You're mobilizing the market. In the navigate phase, you're actually delivering on your promises. So you're going out there and solving the problem. You're helping clients navigate the journey to realizing the results you're promising. So this is what you'd find in a typical company, with sales and marketing and business development and product development, and going out and delivering the product or service and so on. But again, it's done in a particular way with the Apollo method. And then the final phase is the accelerate phase. So even if you successfully achieve go-to status, other Me Too's are going to come after you. And so you always have to accelerate to stay ahead of the pack, and also constantly adapt and modify what you've got to make sure you are always leading the charge ahead of competition, and also broadening your market focus. So with launch, one thing I didn't mention is that in launch, you're really focused in the beginning so that you can get traction. And by the time you're in the accelerate phase, you are able to start broadening your market position. And we've seen a lot of companies do this. So for example, Amazon, we all know, Amazon started with just books. And then over time, they expanded into other things. Gradually, of course, now they provide pretty much everything, which was the original vision. So that's the quick recap.
TikTok is not about music anymore.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, there are famous SAT people. There's a lawyer on there with millions and millions of views. I'm on there doing social media. My sister's selling wigs on TikTok. Mm-hmm. So that's a good example of what you just mentioned.
Yeah, Facebook started just with Harvard, right? They were only available to Harvard students. Then they were only available to Ivy League students. Then they expanded to other schools that were in that same echelon. Stanford was one of them. I was, working at the Stanford Technology Ventures program at the time, and we were paying attention to and we got on Facebook at that time, and actually started doing some advertising even early on. And then, of course, we know that Facebook eventually expanded to everybody once they got traction. But they weren't the first company to be doing that sort of thing. MySpace was very big at that time. There were lots of social media companies coming out. It was a big thing. So, you don't have to be first in the space, but you do need to be unique in the way in which you're going about solving the particular problem or issue.
Do you believe in luck?
Oh, well, the old saying where luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So, yes, many things, there are many good companies that don't make it. And there are very mediocre companies that make it somehow, some way. And sometimes you can't point to, how in the world did they do that? Although, to come up with this methodology, that's exactly what I did. Is I went out and researched companies. I looked at the situation I was facing, because my company was in the same boat as a lot of my clients, where we felt we were different and unique in certain ways, but the market couldn't see it. Even some of our long-time clients couldn't see it anymore. And then I was working with some big, at the time, they were IT services firms that I was focused on, and they were doing the same thing. And then I would hear stories about other companies and individuals who were charging huge premiums for what they were doing. And what they were doing wasn't necessarily that much better, but there was something different about the way they were approaching the market, about the way they were marketing themselves, and about the way they were delivering that made a difference and allowed them to charge a premium. And that's what I wanted to figure out. What is the recipe for how you do that, if there is, one? And I went out, I did a lot of research, and I saw a pattern in what it takes to do this. And also drew on some successes I had at my former employer, Accenture, where I helped build a big business unit for them. And what we did right, even though basically all the market forces were against us, we were trying to break into an industry that didn't want us. We were outsiders. They misperceived us as an accounting firm when we were a technology consulting firm. There was a long list of reasons why we should have failed. But we did the things that are in the Apollo method, and it worked out very well for the company. And so that's how I came up with this recipe.
Yeah, I love recipes because I can change them. To what degree is the recipe malleable?
Well, it's very malleable. I really consider it a framework. So, you can make a lot of choices within that framework. So it's really a timeless framework, and the actual tactics will change with time. For example, TikTok wasn't even a thing when I started working on the book. It didn't exist, or nobody in the US knew about it. And look at it now, and it's certainly part of the marketing toolkit for a lot of companies. And it may make sense for companies pursuing the Apollo method under certain circumstances. So those types of things come and go. But the principles of the framework are timeless, and that's what I focus on in the book. And then I do make specific suggestions because the book is extremely actionable, very step by step. You can go off and implement it without me. It's not a marketing piece for me to try to bring in business. I really wanted to put something out there that people could use and that would stand the test of time, even if certain tactics and trends come and go.
Standing the test of time. I don't know if you have children or not.
I do.
And this generation, and I include both of us when I say that, I mean being alive today, is to me the first wave of human beings that 72,000 years from now will be known as sort of like the Adam and Eve of the digital sort of, there's hundreds of hours of video of these people, right? So for example, my great times a million grandkids can watch this, where they can't see my father who passed away when I was young. That's not the point of the story. The point is that we're going to make up this incredible cultural footprint, because when they try to dig deeper into their ancestry, they're going to find old pictures, maybe, of the generations that go beyond us. So you mentioned timelessness. To what extent would these people 72,000 years from now see in the Apollo method things that are still relevant?
Well, I think that a lot of it will still be relevant because it really draws on a lot of just human nature. And, I didn't emphasize this in the book, but if I wanted to go back and reach for parallels and analogous stories from earlier in history, I could. Um, because and that's marketing too. Marketing is really about human nature and human behavior and social behavior and social nature. And so that's what makes this stuff timeless. There are, for example, I talk in the book about it's called diffusion of innovation. It's not anything I came up with. This is a concept that started to be developed back in the early 1900s. They were trying to figure out what makes farmers adopt new methods, new farming methods. Some farmers adopt them more quickly than others. And what is that pattern and how does that work? And it ended up becoming a very simple bell curve, but it's what we now talk about when we refer to innovators, early adopters, the early majority, late majority, laggards, when you're trying to explain how market adoption happens when something new comes out. So, this is not a new concept. This is human nature in what causes things to catch on. We have The Tipping Point, which is a wonderful book. If any of your listeners have never read it, it's fantastic. And it, again, is timeless because, whatever examples it uses, you could still extrapolate the principles that he talks about in the book. This is Malcolm Gladwell, to any number of situations, including how COVID spread across the world. And the way markets adoption happens is very similar to the way viruses spread. So, there are a lot of principles in the Apollo method, many of which I didn't invent. I didn't invent diffusion of innovation. That's something many academics have been involved in over decades. But these are principles that you can then use to very powerful effect when you're trying to figure out how to establish yourself as a go-to.
It is interesting to me that there are not constants, but these incredible patterns. For example, the sun's probably going to rise tomorrow.
Let's hope.
And by rise, of course, I mean, and just the relative nature of reality. I mean, the sun's moving at 500,000 miles per hour, circling the black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And yet it just appears as something that moves around us. And we obviously know that's not true, but it's all relatively real, based on where you're standing. And so given that the secrets of the universe have made themselves known to you, is your way of paying it forward this work, writing a book and talking to people and letting them in on the secret?
Yes, absolutely. I've been working on this book for longer than I want to admit, and there were many times. A book is a big undertaking. It's not something you just drop it out there and people are going to gravitate toward it, because it takes work to get it out there into the marketplace, just as I talk about in the Apollo method. But one thing that happened is, I would kind of have fits and starts with it. I had my kids. After each kid, I'd put it down. I wouldn't get to it for a while because I was busy being a mom and serving clients. And one thing that really spurred me to make a decision that yes, I am going to do this was I lost a very close friend, and he died way too young. He was an incredibly talented person who pursued a career in law, but he should have been a writer and a performer. And he was just so talented and had so many gifts left to give the world and his friends and family. And I realized that, I don't want to eventually leave this earth with this stuff inside me. I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and I really wanted to make it available to other people to use. And, it's one of these things that I lay it out very comprehensively in the book. I do try to make it very accessible and really simplify a lot of the language so that people with any level of business experience can relate to it. And I have a lot of stories and examples in there, a lot of very fun ones, and poignant ones as well. But, it was important to me just to put it out there and not leave the earth with this inside me. And I really wanted to make sure it was out there for people to take advantage of.
This is the point I always come back to, which is I don't like the word spirituality and I don't like the word psychology. I don't like the word sociology, because then we're not really talking about the cross section of all of those things happening constantly in the human experience. I find that when I listen to folks on the show, it always goes here. It always ends up here. In Chinese, it's the xin xin, which is the heart, the mind heart, right? So it's having the logic of being able to think things through, but also the compassion. And then there's this sort of quality of timelessness or soul or whatever you want to call it, that is the fuel that drives the innovation forward. So you did it, right? So you had this incredible human being in your life who died. You suffered greatly. That played a role in the motivation to do this thing that you sort of had wished that person had done. And then it's done and it's over. Do you ever have conversations with that friend of yours in your head still to this day?
Yeah, it's funny. I unfortunately I somehow lost it, but for a long time I had a voicemail he had left me, not that long before he passed away, and I really enjoyed listening to it because his dry humor came through, even though he was suffering at the time and his family was suffering. He had kids who, were still relatively young and, way too young to lose their dad. And his wife, they had a beautiful marriage. And so I'm sure that he and many other people out there are passing us wisdom all the time in some way. And, inspiring us either in some way, whether it's in our imaginations or whether it's in some other form. I think there's a lot for us to draw on of work and people that have gone before us, and the people, of course, that are in our lives today.
Of course. So let's talk about the role of ego in something as individualistic as writing a book. Do you feel like you are afraid of it not being as popular as it could be? Is popularity the ultimate goal? Are you that person that says, well, if one person gets one little piece of information that's helpful to them, it'll all have been worth it? I mean, how do you measure success on something like this?
Yeah, it's funny because for a long time I vacillated on whether to put it out because when I would talk to people about the Apollo method, now I came up with this a very long time ago. I'll date myself by saying, close to 20 years ago. And the world, I think, wasn't quite ready at that point. I would talk to people about it and they just didn't get it, or they would argue, why would I need to be the go-to? Why not just be one of the pack? It's fine. I'm making plenty of money that way. And so, I would have to get into this big educational process about gross margins and, competition. And a lot of it boils down to physics and finances, really. And, so, I just found myself, I thought it was obvious as to why you would want to become the market leader. And now here's how you go do that. It took a long time for the rest of the world to kind of come around and see it. And when the internet, when marketing went fully digital, or well, it's not fully digital, but when digital marketing really took off, and when even B2B enterprise customers or companies offering B2B enterprise products and services, when even their target customers, who were senior executives, we're the ones going out and looking at websites and receiving, online gathering information. They started realizing, oh my God, we do sound like everybody else. We do look like everybody else. And we are getting those hard questions now. And it was funny because I took a trip around the world with my family. We took the kids and traveled for a year. And when I left, I thought, I'm not sure the world needs this book anymore. I think I won't do it after all. And when I came back, I started doing some exploring just to figure out what I wanted to do next. I had kind of taken that time off, and I started hearing all the same problems, only they were 50 times worse. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it's still needed. And so I decided then I'm just going to put it out there. And, if whoever it helps, but at least it gives me a structured way to talk to people about what they need to do.
Yeah, it is so fascinating to me. Wherever we go, here we are. I will find myself looking at really nice homes and feeling that jealousy, of sort of like, that clinging to it. And then I'm like, as I distance myself from that thought, not pushing it away and not just being like, oh, jealousy, there it is. Hi, jealousy. I will continue this sort of spiritual journey forward, and that sort of clinging of mind. Just today, I was talking with some staff of mine, and they want some help, and it's going to drop revenue below where I'm comfortable. So here comes the thought, like, oh, fear. Oh, not enough budget, not enough this, but having the distance to see it and kind of go, hey, I remember you. Like, I know you, Mr. Fear. How's it going? And just kind of, as Ram Dass would put it, extricating yourself from, or cultivating the witness, as it's called. Because I don't believe that getting rid of those thoughts is going to happen for me in this lifetime. I really don't. I think I will always be having these thoughts come in. But at the end of the day, just to be able to create that spaciousness between me and the thought, in the same way that my heart's going to continue to pump, my mind is going to continue to think. It's just going to continue to do that, and I can witness it and sort of not be so stuck to it. So that's been the cultivation for me of late. And I think listening to you over the past half hour, to be special, because that's really what we're talking about. Because if you're a market leader, a gold medalist is special. I don't care who you are. You know what I mean? We can talk about that word and how loaded it is and all that sort of thing, but it is. Like, we do have people in our societies and cultures that do things that everyone can rally around and go, yeah, that's pretty darn special. Look how high he can jump, how far he can jump, that thing, I don't see the high jumper being also the long jumper, being also the javelinist, being also, you see what I'm saying? Because literally their bodies, this is one of the things I love the most about the Olympics, is just looking at the body types of all the different athletes. The 100-meter
also,
run.
Do you want a dermatologist doing your open heart surgery? Do you want a contract lawyer helping you with your DUI?
Yeah. Right.
One thing I do want to clarify is that being the go-to, it's very important to stay in a mentality of service to your market. That's really what it's all about. And when people are Me Too's, often they're in service to their next revenue dollar. They're really just focused on, how do we eke out that next dollar of revenue? How do we win that next client? How do we scrape by? How do we eke it out? How do we justify affording hiring another headcount, when we have an increased revenue accordingly? So, and there is a certain fear and a state of fear that it keeps you in. Whereas when you're the go-to, you have a higher purpose. You're focused on the market. You're focused on serving the market. You're focused on providing unique value. Yes, your goal is to have higher profits so that you can reinvest in your future and innovate, and you have money to work with to grow. But the way you make that happen is coming from a place of service to the people and markets you're there for, and leading them toward a vision.
Yep. I can't argue with you when you're right. I can't do it. Ladies and gentlemen, marketing is a foreign language. You know the drill. iTunes and Spotify after the fact. If you're listening to us there, we love you and appreciate you. If you want to join us for the live show, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, youtube.com/Send It Rising, simulcasting on 5 different platforms. We're all over the place. Our guest today, as you already know, you don't need me to tell you, is quite the force. Theresa, we would love to have you back, obviously, on the show for a future episode. We have only we haven't even scratched the surface. We've just taken a glimpse at the surface and said, this is scratchable. That is what we've done in our 30 minutes together. We're going to wrap things up. I want to make sure that folks know where to reach you, pitch them, talk to them. Final words.
Yes, you can learn about the book at apollomethod.com. You can get the book on Amazon and at various online and bookstore retailers. And then the company website is linagroup.com. But I would start with apollomethod.com. There are a lot of free resources on there you could take advantage of.
That's what I'm about to go do. I'm going to go purchase the Apollo Method on the Amazon is what I'm going to go do. And you should too. Thank you, everybody. We'll see y'all next time.